Enid Blyton. A Faraway Tree Adventure. A color short story illustrated by Alex Patterson. Joe and the Magic Snowman. The World of the Faraway Tree. Moonface lives at the very top. In his house is the start of the slippery slip, a huge slide that curves all the way down inside the trunk of the tree. Silky lives below Moonface. She is the prettiest little fairy you ever did see. Saucepan Man is a funny old thing. His saucepans make lots of noise when they jangle together, so he can't hear very well. The cloud above the tree leads to amazing places. Which land will the children visit this time? Joe, Beth, Franny. Chapter 1, Beth makes some toffee for Moonface. The children had talked about nothing else but the faraway tree and its strange folk for days. Beth had promised to take toffee to Moonface. Promises must never be broken, she said. I will make some toffee if Mother will let me have the sugar, syrup and milk. Then when it's done you can take it to Moonface, Joe. Mother said they could make toffee on Wednesday, after she had been to the shops. So on Wednesday Beth set to work making the best, sweetest, chewiest toffee she could. She set it in a pan on the stove. It cooked beautifully. When it had cooled and was set nice and hard, Beth broke it up into small pieces. She put them into a paper bag, gave one piece each to the others, and popped one into her own mouth. Tea'll have to go at night, I think, said Joe. I shan't get any time off this week, I know. We're so busy with the garden now. So that night, when the moon was shining brightly in the sky overhead, Joe slipped out of bed. Beth and Franny woke up and heard him. They hadn't meant to go with him, but when they saw the moonlight shining everywhere and thought of that exciting faraway tree, they felt that they simply couldn't stay behind. Wouldn't you have felt that too? They dressed quickly and whispered through Joe's door. We're coming too, Joe. Wait for us. Joe waited. Then they all three slipped down the creaky stairs and out into the moonlit garden. The shadows were very black indeed, just like ink. There was no color anywhere, only just the pale, cold moonlight. They were soon in the enchanted wood. But, dear me, it was quite different now. It was simply alive with people and animals. In the very dark parts of the wood little lanterns were hung in rows. In the moonlit parts there were no lanterns, and a great deal of chattering was going on. Nobody took any notice of the children at all. Nobody seemed surprised to see them. But the children were most astonished at everything. There's a market over there, whispered Joe to Beth. Look! There are necklaces made of painted acorns and brooches made of wild roses. But Beth was looking at something else, a dance going on in the moonlit dell, with fairies and pixies chattering and laughing together. Sometimes, when they were tired of dancing on their feet, partners would fly in the air and dance there in the moonlight. Franny was watching some elves growing toadstools. As fast as the toadstool grew, an elf laid a cloth on it and put glasses of lemonade and tiny cakes there. It was all like a strange dream. Oh, I am glad we came, said Beth, in delight. Who would have thought that the enchanted wood would be like this at night? They wasted a great deal of time looking at everything, but at last they got to the faraway tree. And even here there was a great difference. The whole tree was hung with strings of tiny lights and glittered softly from branch to branch, rather like a very enormous Christmas tree. Joe saw something else. It was a stout rope going from branch to branch, for people to hold on to when they wished to go up the tree. Look at that, he said. It will be much easier to go up tonight. All we'll have to do is just to hold onto the rope and pull ourselves up by it. Come on! Other folk, and some animals too, were going up the tree. Not to the land at the top, but to visit their friends who lived in the trunk of the enormous old tree. All the doors and windows were open now, and there was a great deal of laughing and talking going on. The children climbed up and came at last to the top. They knocked on Moonface's yellow door. "Come in," yelled a voice, and in they went. Moonface was sitting on his curved bed, mending one of his cushions. "Hello," he said. "Did you bring me that toffee you owe me?" "Yes," said Joe, handing him the bag. "There's a lot there. Moonface have to pay you for last week's slippery slide, and have to pay you if you'll let us go down again tonight." "Oh my," said Moonface, looking with great delight into the bag. "What lovely toffee!" He crammed 4 large pieces into his mouth and sucked with joy. "Is it nice?" said Beth. "Ooble ooble ooble ooble," answered Moonface, quite unable to speak properly, for his teeth were all stuck together with the toffee. The children laughed. "Is the roundabout land at the top of the faraway tree?" asked Joe. Moonface shook his head. "Ooble," he said. "What land is there now?" asked Franny. Moonface made a face, and screwed up his nose. "Ooble ooble 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 ooble," he said very earnestly. "Oh dear, we shan't be able to get anything out of him at all whilst he's eating toffee," said Beth. "He'll just ooble away." "What a pity! I would have liked to know what strange land was there tonight." "Teal just go and peep," said Joe, jumping up. Moonface looked alarmed. He shook his head, and caught hold of Joe. "Ooble ooble ooble ooble," he cried. "It's all right, Moonface, I'm only going to peep," said Joe. "I shan't go into the land." "Oh obleo 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 obleo," cried Moonface in a fright, trying his best to swallow all the toffee so that he could speak properly. "Ooble!" Joe didn't listen. He went out of the door with the girls, and climbed up the last branch of the faraway tree. What strange land was above it this time? Joe peered up through the dark hole in the cloud, through which a beam of moonlight shone down. He came to the little ladder that ran up the hole in the cloud. He climbed up it. His head poked out into the land at the top. He gave a shout. "Beth! Franny! It's a kind of ice and snow. There are big white bears everywhere. Oh, do come and look." But then a dreadful thing happened. Something lifted Joe right off the ladder, and he disappeared into the land of ice and snow above the cloud. "Come back! Joe, come back," yelled Moonface, swallowing all his toffee in fright. "You mustn't even look, or the snowman will get you." But Joe was gone. Beth looked at Moonface in dismay. "What shall we do?" she said. Chapter 2, Joe and the Magic Snowman. Moonface was most upset to see Joe disappear. "I told him not to, I told him," he groaned. "You didn't," sobbed Franny. "Your mouth was full of toffee and all you could say was ooble ooble ooble. And how could we know what that meant?" "Where's Joe now?" asked Beth, quite pale with shock. Yes, indeed, where was Joe? Someone had lifted him right off the ladder, up into the land of ice and snow. And there, strangely enough, the moon and the sun were in the sky at the same time, one at one side and the other opposite, both shining with a pale light. Joe shivered, for it was very cold. He looked up to see what had lifted him off the ladder, and he saw in front of him a big strange creature, a snowman. He was just like the snowman Joe had so often made in the wintertime, round and fat and white, with an old hat stuck on his head and a carrot for a nose. "This is luck," said the snowman, in a soft, snowy sort of voice. "T've been standing by that hole for days, waiting for a seal to come up, and you came." "Oh," said Joe, remembering that seals came up to breathe through holes in the ice. "That wasn't a water hole, that was the hole that led down the faraway tree." "I want to go back, please." "The hole has closed up," said the snowman. Joe looked, and to his great dismay he saw that a thick layer of ice had formed over the hole, so thick that he knew perfectly well he could never break through it. "Whatever shall I do now?" he said. "Just what I tell you," said the snowman, with a grin. "This is splendid. In this dull and silent land there is nothing but polar bears and seals and penguins. I have often wanted someone to talk to." "How did you get here?" asked Joe, wrapping his coat firmly round him, for he was bitterly cold. "Ah," said the snowman, "that's a long story. I was made by some children long ago, and when they had finished me, they laughed at me and threw stones at me to break me up. So that night I crept away here and made myself king, but what's the good of being king if you've only bears and things to talk to? What I want is a really good servant who can talk my language. And now you've come." "But I don't want to be your servant," said Joe indignantly. "Nonsense," said the snowman, and he gave Joe a push that nearly sent him over. Then, on big, flat snow feet he moved forward to where there was a low wall of snow. "Make me a good house," he said. "I don't know how to," said Joe. "Oh, just cut blocks of this stiff icy snow and build them up one on top of another," said the snowman. "When you've finished I'll give you a warm coat to wear. Then you won't shiver so much." Joe didn't see that he could do anything but obey. So he picked up a shovel that was lying by the wall and began to cut big bricks of the frozen snow. When he had cut about 20 he stopped and placed them one on top of another till one side of the round house was made. Then he began to cut snow bricks again, wondering all the time how in the world he would ever be able to escape from this strange land. Joe had often built little snow houses of soft snow in his garden at home during the winter. Now he had made a big one, with proper snow blocks, as hard as bricks. He quite enjoyed it, though he did wish the girls were there too. When he had finished it, and made a nice rounded roof, the snowman came shuffling up. "Very nice," he said, "very nice indeed. I can just get in, I think." He squeezed his big snow body inside, and threw out a thick coat for Joe, made of wool as soft and as white as the snow all around. Joe put it on very thankfully. Then he tried to squeeze in after the snowman, for he wanted to be out of the cold, icy wind. But he was so squashed between the snowman and the walls of the snow house that he couldn't breathe. "Don't push so," said the snowman disagreeably. "Move up." "I can't," gasped poor Joe. He felt quite certain that he would be pushed right out of the snow hut through a hole in the wall. Just then there came a curious grunt at the doorway. The snowman called out at once. "Is that you, Furry? Take this boy to your home under the ice. He's a nuisance here. He keeps squashing me." Joe looked up to see who Furry